So I hope you will enjoy this, and yeah, let's get to it. I think it's Jaaka's turn now.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure meeting you all and seeing you all. I will speak about the Hogan part and what Hogan says when it comes to leading through a crisis. But let me first start with a story, an inspirational story, which I picked to show that crisis isn't something that we are facing right now. It's something that there has been for centuries, and the fact that how someone is able to deal with a crisis, especially a leader, is basically what happens to the people they lead and what happens with the organization they're leading. So for the inspiration, I would like to start with a story which is older than 100 years. And it's an expedition of Ernst Shackleton, an adventurer who decided to cross Antarctica as the very first person with his group. And I will say that he failed, and only in 1940s, with support of heated ships, people were actually able to do that. But he aimed on doing that in 1914. But the problem was that he got stuck in an ice with his ship, and he basically spent 17 months on an ice floe because the ship wasn't really able to go anywhere, and it eventually sank. So he moved the whole staff outside of the ship. They lived on an ice floe. They took only the things they were able to. They built tents, they went hunting, and he wanted his staff to do as much of the routine as possible. He never let people feel down, and he really prioritized his staff morale. For example, he took the people who he knew were dealing the worst with the situation to sleep with him in the tent, because he could speak with them and he could comfort them. He knew that if the people were split around the rest of the staff, that would diminish and kind of endanger the morale of the staff. And he knew that if people will feel down, they will make mistakes, and this can have fatal results. What he also had to do was to adapt to changing conditions. First, he had to figure out how to occupy the ship when it's stuck in the ice. Then he had to figure out how to live on the ice floe. Then he decided he will walk for help. So he took a couple of his men and he walked, and he even crossed mountains. And he always said, if something happens to me, it will be like a murder for those who I left behind. So he was determined, and he managed to get a rescue for all his men, and everyone returned alive. So facing a difficult situation, he was able to adapt to things that have changed. He didn't lose it. He tried to stay positive. He gave orders, he gave directions, and he prioritized staff morale. And basically this is what helped him and his staff survive. There has been a book written about him and his expedition. I totally recommend reading it because it's a great lesson from leadership. So I will now use those examples in what Hogan has to say about leadership and bringing it into our context. We know that every organization will eventually face a crisis at some point. Right now, we're dealing with the COVID situation, something that we never faced before in the way we face it now, having all the digital support available, thanks to which we are now able to speak. But nobody was prepared for that. And well, the legacy of the leader is about how they handle the crisis, because then this is the result, what they get if they fail, if they survive. I recently read a research that maybe even a quarter of small businesses will have to close in my area due to the current financial situation. And the leadership then should be defined in our terms as the ability to build and maintain top performing teams compared to other teams. And that's how we should basically understand what leadership is. It's not something we are born with, it's something what we do. And it's what our people do in our teams and how we manage to get them do the things they wouldn't do on their own. But in situation of crisis, things are getting even more difficult. We don't have much time to think. We don't have any important or any significant predictions for the future. We just have to adapt. And Hogan, as an expert in personality, and which is one of our core products, core solutions in our business. We are familiar with the research that Hogan did when he described who are the leaders, who are the most successful, who lead the most successful teams. And maybe that's a fruit for your thought. What kind of people are leading the crisis, and what kind of people should be given the responsibility of leading difficult situations in difficult times. So Hogan looks at a personality through 3 different perspectives. Those of you who are Hogan certified certainly know all the 3 aspects, but let me briefly summarize that so we all are on the same page and so that we understand how to read or how to understand the research that Hogan did. So I would like to start with the blue part, motives, values, and preferences inventory. That's the area, the assessment that describes our own values. This is why we get out of the bed in the morning, what kind of goals we set to ourselves, what motivates us, what makes us happy, what kind of environments we like, what kind of opinions we have, and ultimately what kind of decisions we make, where we put and see a priority in our lives. It can be a financial security, it can be a need for being available for help to others. It can be an ultimate goal to be famous and recognized for one's accomplishments. There are various themes, and some of them have been proven to work as value-based leadership and as what's key for a leader to lead through crisis. HPI, the second assessment, Hogan Personality Inventory, is our day-to-day behavior. It's basically how we manage stress, how we interact with others, what kind of strengths and weaknesses we have to accomplish the goals we set, who we are in our best days, what kind of problem-solving style we have. If we are someone who is pretty extroverted, enjoying social interaction, open to new ideas, if we are someone who is maybe straightforward, willing to provide feedback, if we are curious learners, all these things are covered in Hogan Personality Inventory. And also here, we discover a couple of useful traits, useful behaviors that help people be successful as leaders. And last but not least is Hogan Development Survey. Hogan Development Survey describes who we become when we are stressed, what kind of behaviors are switched on when things don't go as we expected. This is something that plays a huge role in the crisis context because, of course, this leads to increased levels of stress and maladaptive behaviors that the people have. Typically, we overuse the strengths we have on a daily basis to a non-effective degree in stressful situations. Imagine someone who is highly reliable, highly responsible, pretty organized, someone who always knows all the details. will eventually, when stressed, possibly become someone who is micromanaging, controlling everything to every painstaking detail, who really has an extremely high levels of expectations from everybody, which leads him or her to spending 2 or 3 times more the time than is actually needed for a task, just because they are afraid they will fail, they will be doing not enough to really meet the standards that they set. And of course, there are behaviors covered in HDS which correlate negatively with successful performance. So there are certain scales which, much more than others, lead to failure and to difficulties when leading a team. So let's have a look at that. Combining the 3 aspects, we can say that HPI is the bright side, HDS is the dark side, and MVPI is the inside of personality. And that's the unique look on personality from Hogan perspective. Maybe one thing to add, which is very relevant for Hogan context, is that Hogan measures one's behavior in the eyes of others in terms of reputation. Maybe you're familiar with this word. That means it's not really what we have on our inside, what we think about ourselves, but it's about what other people think about us. Because in the organizational context, it doesn't matter as much what we think about ourselves. I won't be hired because I think I'm the best candidate. I will be hired only if the other people think I am the best candidate. And sometimes we have blind spots. We tend to see only our positives, and we don't want to admit to ourselves that we have some negatives. So because of that, the perspective of reputation is very useful. Here we summarized some of the main behaviors that are very useful for successful leaders based on what the robust Hogan data sets say. So leaders who are calm and don't really panic are those who are more successful than those who panic easily and who lose their mind very quickly. Their people really need to see them as kind of someone who stands firm, to whom they can rely on, who will provide them a support, and who will not like panic and get stuck being undecisive about what to do next. And another key component is someone who will take charge, someone who will not rely on others to do the job, but someone who will say things will be done like this or like that, and you need to do this and that. Let's go back to Ernst Shackleton. He was the one who really showed the energy to lead people even through such difficult situations. He took charge. He kind of said what kind of things have to happen, what kind of things happen next. Some people were actually willing to wait for him to come back to save him. So they waited, and they had to rely on him that he will do his best and he will come back to them. I don't know what I would do, but I know that I would totally be scared. But he actually managed to calm people down. They waited, they survived, and he saved them safely home. Another useful behavior is about staying engaged and connected with people. That means not really shutting down and disconnecting and like trying to manage things on your own. It's about showing that you are here and you're available when people need you. It's about knowing what people have on their mind, what they are worried about, and not trying to disconnect because this is too much or because this is not important. This is important, and people need to have this kind of connection and engagement. Another helpful behavior is about being open to new ideas and building trust. So what's useful, it's not saying like, things will not gonna work, never, and I don't like any of the ideas you're bringing, and I don't trust ever this will work. That's what maybe the unsuccessful leader will say. Successful leaders are trying to do the best out of the situation, and they support their people and they build trust. They encourage them to bring new ideas because they understand that they are not the only ones who have good ideas, but other people have them as well. They don't criticize, or they don't think people will just slack off because they are working from home and he or she cannot control them. It's about giving trust and encouraging people to come with new ideas and not really kind of closing or dismissing all the ideas that people bring. Another useful behavior, we are now getting to the second part, is about open communication. Successful leaders don't say things that are not true, or they don't give things lip service. They don't sugarcoat people. They admit when there are problems, and they're showing that they're going to face it, and eventually they will manage to go through that. So, because when there's no open communication, people will get scared, people will get paranoid because of that. They will think that the biggest problems are being hidden from them, and maybe the company will start laying off people the other day just because things are not communicated properly, and maybe the financial issues are bigger than they are being told. Open communication is connected with building the trust, basically, and it's also about not hiding from the problem, but facing it. Another thing really helpful for successful leaders is about showing compassion and genuinely caring for other people. This is what's very nicely close to, connected with staying engaged and connected. Successful leaders care about their people and take them as human beings. They are not someone who will just like ignore when people are feeling down. The successful leaders is asking questions and is staying connected with the people and genuinely cares. He or she doesn't ask questions just because someone expects them to ask questions, but because he or she genuinely cares, and when possible does something about the problems his staff or her staff is having. So putting a priority, this is about values much more than about an actual behavior, because you can be a listener, someone who doesn't say very much, who asks 1 or 2 questions and let the person speak for an hour, or you can be someone who creates or does a peer group run online when people have a chance to show what they have troubles with, and building a self-help group who will figure out how things can work better. It actually doesn't matter how you do that. You have your own personal style. It's much more about the fact that you care and that you show compassion. So this one is more about values. I will shortly reveal what kind of scores are behind that, but I'm now trying to bring a bigger context before we start speaking about the actual scales. Another very helpful behavior is about confidence in making critical decisions. It's absolutely normal to panic a bit and get stuck when circumstances change and when there are decisions to be made. A lot of people freeze off. That's basically a very normal reaction. But people really need critical decisions. People need to move on. And sometimes even bad decisions are better than no decisions, because at least there is a movement, at least something happens, and if you make a mistake, you learn from it. But not making a decision at all is sometimes the worst thing that can happen, because it leads to misorganization, it leads to confusion among a lot of people, and there's no learning from mistakes. So that's another thing that's clearly needed for a successful leader. And after all, when we connect these things together, it's about being a unifying force. Again, it's much more about values. than an actual behavior. The leader can be someone who stands behind, who is not really seen, but who is able to connect the people together. Or it can be someone who will stand in front of the whole team and will say, guys, we're gonna have a drink together this night, and we're gonna think about how the week went and what can we do better the following week. So there are different behaviors or different approaches which can all be successful, but it's often about values and about certain behaviors. So now, when I have described what kind of behaviors are successful, let me ask you, I will shortly show you the scales which are loaded in these behaviors. But maybe those of you who are Hogan certified can maybe guess what kind of scales are actually connected with these kinds of behaviors. So I encourage you to open the chat, and with the chat you will be able to comment and say, maybe it's a certain scale in HPI that you have in mind. Maybe it's an HDS behavior that you think will really be bad for such behavior, or maybe it's the values that we have been speaking about. So I see I have a first comment. Oh, I see. So the chat is disabled. Sorry for saying that. So please open the Q&A and use Q&A to send your comments. I will give you a couple of seconds. No guesses? If you're not sure, you can answer anonymously. Okay, I'm not gonna let you wait if you're not. Oh, I see. First comment. Adjustment. Ambition. Nice guess. Interpersonal sensitivity can be a nice guess. Remains calm and takes charges. High adjustment. Nice guesses. What about some values? What do you think will help as values? I will tell you that it's connected with showing compassion and caring genuinely. And it's about staying engaged and connected. Altruistic. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for your engagement. All of you were basically right. From HPI, what showed to be very helpful is high adjustment and high ambition. High adjustment is connected with remaining calm, not panicking, managing one's emotions effectively, being steady, adapting to changing circumstances quite well. And high ambition is about taking charge. It's about focus on results. It's about willing to deliver, willing to accomplish something. So these are the two behaviors that in HPI have been proven to be working very well for successful crisis leaders. Interesting part is that the remaining scales in HPI didn't show as big or as relevant correlation. The other behaviors are much more in HDS and MVPI. For HDS, that's the stress-related behavior. That was the moving away tendency. That was because people have three different styles of stress response. One of them is moving away, basically flight. It's kind of disappearing from the problem, trying to pretend that the problem is not there. And that's something that confuses people and that actually stops people from dealing with the actual problem. People who move away when they're stressed. They are not open to new ideas. They don't trust other people. They want to be left on their own to cope with the stressful situation on their own. And these, among other behaviors that my colleague Gabor will be speaking about soon, has been highest negatively correlated with successful teams leading. And in MBPI, those are the values, those are the things we believe in. High affiliation, that's the value in creating connections and staying engaged and connected in team settings. It's about valuing human contact. Those leaders are successful because they build coalitions, they stay connected, they communicate, they create opportunities for people to meet and to solve problems together, which especially in these times when we are disconnected, staying at our homes 24 hours a day, can be pretty nice change to see the people we know and speak with the people we know. I know that after a couple of weeks, people get frustrated by meeting people only online, but that's another thing. The first reaction to crisis has to be bringing people together and not hiding from the problems. Another helpful value here is being high altruistic. This is typical for people who are working in service and in people support functions, HR people, psychologists, social workers, customer care. These people live to help others. These people are very happy when they can do something that makes other people happy and solve their problems. And having a value in that is about caring for other people genuinely and trying to help people when they need it. And last but not least, and very interesting from my perspective, was low security. Out of all of that, this is the only one that is low. And let me give you a contrast. People who score high on security, they need predictability, they need structure. They dislike when circumstances change. Those are the people who happily stay at one job, having one role for 10 years because they have job security. They know that they are counted with for following years. But when the crisis comes, the circumstances change and it's very hard for them to adapt to such situations. But people who score low on security, they adapt very easily. They don't mind when things change under their hands and when their job changes from one day to another. They enjoy unstable and unpredictable environments. And therefore, they are successful as leaders because the changes don't really stress them. They enjoy the changes and they try to do the best out of such changes. So basically, this would be some sort of ideal profile for a crisis leader. But again, we are speaking about an ideal. And we know that the world is not about ideals. It's about compromises, that it's about strengths and weaknesses everyone has. And fortunately, we are always speaking about our behavior and we have a control over our behavior. So basically what the research helps us with is to understand what kind of behavior we maybe need to change and what kind of behavior we need to support. So here are my 5 tips before I give my word to Gabor about what kind of things you need to have in mind when you're leading people through crisis to be more effective, to be more supportive to your people, and at the end of the day, getting to the results and surviving and maybe even getting stronger after the whole situation is over. So the first tip would be to manage and be aware of feelings of irritation, frustration, and stress. It's very natural to feel irritated, frustrated, stressed, and angry. Those are all human emotions. But we need to understand that when we are angry, when we are frustrated, other people around us get frustrated and stressed as well. Emotions are contagious. And if we manage to figure out what kind of things are irritating us, what kind of things are frustrating us, and maybe kind of meditate with that, get this kind of information through us and adapt to them, and communicate with people only once these irritations and frustrations are over, or having some stress techniques that can help us when we are facing a difficult situation, which is something we will be speaking later on as well, will help you and everybody who's leading through crisis to kind of stay firm and unshaken. And also other people will stay firm and unshaken. But of course, it's not about underestimating the situation. It's not about saying, no, the problem is not there. We are fine. Everything is fine. Only the whole building is burning. It's about admitting when there are problems, but rationally providing suggestions about what we will do about that, and giving clear directions and decisions whenever possible. So it's not about belittling or belittling the problem or making a catastrophe out of that. It's about saying, look, these are the circumstances. This is what we are going to do about that. I know that the things will not be easy, but we will manage to get through this together. Another part of that is, and we mentioned it already several times, is about adapting to changing circumstances. We can't really expect that during crisis the status quo will remain. We have to admit that things, whether we like it or not, will change. And therefore, we need to adapt. We need to be open to new ideas. We need to be creative and encourage creativity to move on, adapt, maybe develop something new or change the old ways of doing things because they don't work anymore. And this is a huge challenge which every single organization is facing now. Regardless of the industry, regardless of its size, things have changed literally for everybody. And we need to adapt. Who fails to adapt will fail in the crisis. And after all, the very helpful thing is having a priority in people morale, well-being, and cohesion. Really and honestly caring about people and their problems, and not just trying to sweep them under carpet because these are their personal things and they have to adjust. No, they are human beings and they need support. They need a hand, and they need to know that there's someone who they can rely on, because this really makes them loyal. This makes them less stressed. With this, they will make fewer mistakes, there will be fewer frustration, maybe bigger productivity. But they need to see that they are not just numbers, they are human beings who really belong to the team and who are counted with. So these are the 5 tips. We will be sharing, of course, the slides with you. So in case I was too fast and didn't really, and you didn't really catch everything, we have the recording and we will send you the slides. Those are my recommendations. Of course, I will be very curious to hear maybe what kind of other recommendations from your experience, what kind of behaviors are useful. Maybe we can discuss that in the Q&A session. But for now, my session is over, and let me hand my word to Gabor.
And thank you, Jarka. As it was said, I'd like to continue and focus a little bit on the dark side. So, to be honest, you had the opportunity to hear a lot about the crisis leader, those characteristics that can be important for a real crisis leader. What I would like to do now is to talk about leaders in crisis. And as you can see, and as you can guess, the topic is quite close to the previous one. Why I would like to devote special attention to this is because of the fact that these times we are living right now, so basically Corona or COVID, creates extra tensions and extra stress. And, you know, HDS or the dark side characteristics are always seen under stress. So the stronger the crisis, the stronger the coping mechanisms in ourselves, and then the stronger our reactions, the stronger the stress, and then we arrive to the dark side. So as it is written here, everything is more extreme. Bright is brighter, dark is darker. Plus, so it's not just about an extra load of stress, but we are also talking about new sources of stress. I mean, isolation, frustration, and feelings of insecurity about the future, or just, you know, kids running around us, and we have to focus on our work, which is not a usual source of stress for us. And I tell you this because, yeah, they are extremely important. And even if someone learned how to control his or her stress reactions and dark side under, you know, stress, because of these new sources, because of the extreme stress load, even these people can go into extreme coping mechanisms and show again some dark side derailers that can, you know, devastate team functioning and, of course, their own career on the long term. So a special focus on HDS and dark side characteristics here. And just to give you one more maybe funny example about bright is brighter, dark is darker, and that I'm not just talking in the air. One of our clients told me a joke about that. He said that, you know, do you know what will happen after 9 months after the crisis in terms of relationships? Well, Gabor, there will be more babies and more divorces. So as you can see, everything is really extreme, and we have to face that. And again, even if you can fit the crisis leader profile, even if you can avoid those dark side characteristics mentioned in that profile, it is very likely that you will show your own dark side characteristics. By the way, after millions of test sessions, it is also proven that basically everybody on Earth has 1 to 3 dark side characteristics in his or her profile. So as you can see, basically everybody has at least one. And even if it's not part of or is not going against the crisis leader profile, it will come out, it will play like a real derailer, and then it can cause problems in team functioning. Because that's the playground of HDS. It's not really devastating for the person itself. It's more devastating for his or her interpersonal relationships. And, you know, in a leadership position, that's extremely important because they have subordinates. They really have to, you know, work with them, lead them. So they cannot avoid human touch, human connections. They will be seen, and if they play according their coping mechanisms, then there will be some problems. So as it was said, we are also measuring, you know, via HDS these dark side characteristics, or HDS functioning, as we used to say. But instead of you know, jumping into these ones and going through them one by one, I've decided to pick only 3 of them. Not just because there are 3 big clusters about how people can go into dysfunctional strategies as they were defined in the middle of the century, but because when we have reviewed leadership population, there were 3 characteristics that were more frequent in leadership population than in other populations. And I would like to focus on these ones. But before doing so, just one more reminder about this spiral, and that's also one more reason why we all leaders have to focus on this dark side is that not just that leaders can run amok, and that's a problem, of course, but because it is also a proven fact that stress creates stress. It is proven by many theories. Last time I've heard it in process communication model. And it means that if I'm in stress and if I'm in a relation in you and we are maybe communicating, so there's a live interpersonal session, and when I'm stressed, I will stress you or the other person. So that's contagious, and that's also a problem. That's how we can create even more stress when we are stressed, and that's how we can push our own people and leaders, their people, into stress functioning, into dysfunctional strategies, and then it's even worse. And then, as I said, dark is even darker. So as I said, I would like to quickly review the 3 most frequent leadership dark side characteristics, and not just what they mean in general, but also I would like to highlight some extra outcomes in these times. When we are at home, we have to work remotely, when we are isolated, etc. And also, just to give you, relief, there will be some ideas what these people with these characteristics can do in order to control their dark side. So the first one is the so-called skeptical. As you can judge from the title or from the name, because I think it speaks for itself, we are talking about individuals who are a little bit mistrustful, cynical. They usually focus on negative outcomes. They really don't believe in people or in general in everything. And that's why they are preparing for the worst. So especially these times, what came out from their pipe is that, they assume that others are slacking at home. They don't have that control they used to have in the office, where they can simply, walk around and see that everybody is in front of their computers and typing, and that's okay. Now they feel that because they cannot check everybody, it's very likely that they are just doing something else. They are slacking, they are resting, and because of that, it can happen that they would like to initiate even stronger control. They initiate unexpected calls, unexpected sessions, just to see what others are doing. Or they would like to see everything, outcomes in terms of emails, etc., as a proof that others are working. In addition to that, they might spread conspiracy theories about other co-workers, about other leaders, about other departments, that they are slacking, of course. Or they can spread these theories about the government, about the virus itself, which can be, as you can see, especially emotionally exhaustive to others. Not just to see that things are sometimes falling apart around us, but to see that no one is really helping, and everything that used to help or was intended to help is just part of a bigger conspiracy theory. So it can be extremely devastating. And what these people can do, well, it's not easy, to be honest. First of all, they should suspend judgment. As I said, it's not easy, but that's what they have to do for themselves. I mean, they have to stop telling characteristics about others. They can situation. They can talk about what we have to do, but at least they have to stop talking about characteristics, that these people are these and these and these. They are in the background doing this and this and this, because yeah, that's the way. Suspend these judgments, because they are good in judgments, especially negative judgments. In the same time, what they have to do is that they have to start appreciating others and their efforts, even if it's a small one, even if it's not really meaningful. It is worthy of a positive reply, a positive feedback. Modern, leadership theory, by the way, says that we have to give 4 positive and 1 negative feedback. So that's the healthy ratio. And especially in these times, when people might feel, I mean, co-workers might feel that they also lost some control. They cannot feel that they are so effective they used to be. It's especially important to give them some positive remarks, and then they can feel that yes, they are still performing and performing well. And of course, not a big surprise, they should criticize less. The next one is colorful, which is about showing off, usually, being in the center of attention, talking about yourself, if you have, of course, colorful. And in these times, it can play out, especially like the person who's really talking a lot, because about his or her personal challenges and successes, and it is even more brutal because I bet that you are also sitting in different calls throughout the whole day, so from 9 until 5, or at least I'm doing something like that every day, which means that if someone is really talking about these personal challenges and wins in every call, and starting from the starting point in every call, then it can take a lot of time, and then it's also a source of inefficiency. For example, I've just heard about a leader of a management team who plays this card like, I just want to talk 3 minutes about my deeds from the last 2 days, the most important one. And then the outcome is that the person is basically stealing 53 minutes from the entire conversation, because yeah, he's talking about his glorious deeds and the challenges he has to solve. And yeah, to be honest, when we are talking via these online sessions, it's even more risky because there's just a camera. I mean, you cannot see the others. There are a lot of non-verbal communication that is basically signals. The person might receive that it's too much, and it's maybe boring for the others talking about my own challenges and successes. So it's boring, I should stop. And via online communication, as I said, less signals, less chance that I can identify that I'm too much, and then I stop. Of course, these people can ping pong between topics and to-dos, which can be a source of ineffectiveness. Plus, they can be also overly dramatic about happenings. And as you can imagine, yes, the situation is not rosy. If someone uses melodramatic expression, the situation is not just bad, it's like catastrophic, etc. Then it can put an extra emotional burden on others in these times. So as I said, dark is darker in these times. And what these people should do and pay attention is to share recognition. So talk about not just my own successes, but the successes of the whole team. Or it's even better if they can really pass the word to others so that they can also talk about their own small successes and challenges, of course, in a limited time. They also have to know their weaknesses, which is basically true for every HDS characteristics, but especially true for these people because they cannot admit them, because they are talking always about successes. And yes, they have to moderate their own airtime and expression, which is very good for the morale, which can go down in these times when we are separated. So this is colorful. Even more frequent from the more frequent ones, this is diligent. And this is so because a lot of leaders are coming from expert positions or expert-like positions. So it was okay to be diligent and prudent before, but in a leadership position, as you might know, it can be a nightmare, especially if it is on this level, on this dark side characteristic level. So they are, micromanagers, control freak people, as we used to say in kitchen language. But in these times, the special thing came out from the fact that they might enforce minor rules that are senseless. Senseless because we are working from home. It's a different situation. So I bet that there are rules in every company, in every organization that are really useless in these times. You should not admit them. You should not, list something. You should not follow up something. You should not do it in that way, because it has nothing in this time. But they might insist on these minor rules. Of course, they are control freak, as I said, and in these times, as I said, under skeptical, it's harder to control anything. So in order to keep it, they might feel that they really have to see everything, every outgoing communication, every outgoing material, because that's the way they can assume that the outcome will be perfect, because they are perfectionist people. And it's also easy to imagine that these times it is sometimes a little bit harder to do exactly the same quality as we used to when we were in the office. We had a chance to talk, and it was easy to find a pair of five to quickly review what I have done. So at the end, they might feel, these people, that they really have to control, and on the extreme, they have to do everything on their own, because it's harder to create perfect outcomes, so they have to do it. They are the only ones who can do it, because they have that level of, expected outcomes, that they have to do it. And everybody else is just, on 99% or something like that. What these people can do? Well, they have to understand that they have to apply different solutions to different issues, especially these times. Issues are different, situation is different, so we have to approach them in a different way. So there can be some rules, but not the previous ones. And yes, what they have to understand is that they really have to delegate responsibility. So not just the task, but the whole responsibility. And then they can, avoid reviewing everything if they can make it sure that others are really responsible for their own materials, outgoing materials, and then they will do their best. Maybe this last one is not a big surprise. It is also true for non-COVID stress situations as well. But I feel that it has a special, spice in these times. So these were the three most frequent things leaders have to be aware. And to give you a script, what you have to do, what other leaders have to do these times. So what's the best to prepare, is that I bet everybody had some assessments, or at least feedbacks, before this crisis. And the best way is that to open these things and stream outcomes, extreme scores, because those are the ones that can be derailers, extreme dark sides under stress. And yes, people have to just imagine or go through those descriptions and find out what these things will bring up under dark times. Then they have to look at themselves, observe themselves without any justification, because that's the problem with HDS. We can always justify our behavior, but it's not about the what we are doing. We have the reason. It's always about the how. And that's not justifiable. I can be nervous, that's okay. I have my reason. Because I'm nervous, because there is a problem, we have to act quickly. That's also okay, it's not a question. But if I'm, shouting and discouraging others, etc., that's not the way it has to be done. And then it's really about the how, the communication, the way these people addressing stress. So at the end, what I would like to tell is that, or suggest, is that yes, we have to admit that there's a dark side in ourselves, and then we can apply some simple tricks. That's a great prep up. That's a great starting point. And then I really believe that it is possible, even if it's more darker, even if it's harder, but it's still possible to counter our dark side characteristics and go back to normal. And then, as you can see, it's a boost to morale, it's a boost to leadership. As you could see from the Shackleton experience and example, I would say in times of crisis, team morale is even more important. Maybe that's the crucial part where leaders have to pay attention. And as you could see, HDS and dark side characteristics are usually against these morale, against interpersonal relationships. So that's why we have to pay attention to them, counter them, get rid of them, ask for a lot of feedback, and then it's entirely possible to go back to normal and survive, or even, you know, flourish in these times. But maybe that's a little bit too much. So thanks, and here comes a Q&A session. So Jarka and me are now ready to answer some questions coming from you regarding crisis leader or leader in crisis, or whatever connected to HDS and HPI and MVPI, or crisis or leadership.
And just a quick reminder, you can send in your questions through the Q&A, which is part of your Zoom panel, really. And maybe while we are waiting for that, I have just a quick one, which would be, is there a difference in terms of like a personality profile between leaders who lead local teams and leaders who lead remote teams in crisis? Is there a noticeable difference maybe that we know of between profiles of those people? Maybe this question goes more to Jarka, I'm not sure.
I think the situation that we are working on remote is increasing the levels of stress for everybody. So for such situations, the stress-related behavior, when we have to adapt, when we have to how do I say it? When we have to deliberately change the ways of our doings without anybody being able to tell us how and what's the best, I would consider the stress management both for the leader and for managing his or her behavior, but also taking care of the stress levels of the employees. I went through a couple of researches for teams who are working on remote. And what one of the research said is that when people stop communicating, it is the moment before there is a hiccup, a mistake, something that happens as an error, maybe poor delivery to a client, maybe missing a deadline. But connecting people and bringing them together and making them communicate, not like hiding from each other because they're in different time zones or because they're busy with the work. No, people have to speak, and people need to be brought together even more when they cannot be physically together. Let me also take the question coming through Q&A. How do we increase adjustment and ambition? Well, we cannot technically increase, we are not aiming on increasing our score in Hogan profile. The good thing is that each score, even having the lowest ambition, lowest adjustment, is always connected with strengths and with weaknesses. What we can change is not our Hogan profile. What we change is our behavior. And there are plenty of tips about what to do more, what to do less, which we like to walk through when we provide feedback based on Hogan or where we work with teams. From top of my head, when I'm speaking about adjustment, what to start, what to stop, and what to continue. What to start is maybe to keep one's negative and irritated emotions more to oneself. Low adjusted people have a higher tendency to complain and to verbalize things that are going on. but it makes them look like they are not really making it. It's like they are, maybe the problems are even bigger because they are speaking about that constantly. Meeting people online, meeting people in person, it doesn't really make a difference. What they should continue is they actually have a very useful role in teams, and they are the people who are the first to push the crisis button and say, like, guys, things are going on, we need to do something about that. If you would have a full team of highly adjusted people, everybody would be like, come on, this is fine, we'll do it, there's no problem. But a very important thing low adjusted people do is that they have a sense of urgency. They will tell you when things are going badly, they sense it and they feel it. So that's a thing to continue. And what I didn't say was to start, and that's to kind of like maybe develop some techniques, how to adapt to stressful situations, maybe taking a mindfulness training, something to do about their emotions, because even how we manage our emotions is something that can be trained. That's what the research says. And it doesn't even have to be very difficult. There are many programs, there are many books, self-help books, which will help them adapt their emotions. But don't get it wrong, low adjustments are as good as high adjustments. All we need to change is our behavior. For example, just for a contrast, people who are highly adjusted, they also have their weaknesses. They don't have such a big sense of urgency. They consider every problem as, it's okay, it's not a problem, we will do that. But sometimes they are too much relaxed. One of our clients who is working as a charity in a third world is sending people for missions into third world countries for medical support and social support. And these people are being selected with Hogan as well. And what they figured out is that if people are too high on adjustment, they don't have this like sense of risk, and they get into risky situations much more because they think everything is fine, even though it really isn't. And in such situations, you really have to be aware of the risks, because it can cost you a lot. You can be kidnapped, you can be robbed, you can be, I don't want to continue, but there are pluses and weaknesses connected with adjustment. And the same goes to ambition. If we want to be more ambitious, we need to kind of figure out what our goals are. Have the ultimate goals, have the dedication to work on that, showing the energy and showing the willingness that we are the ones who are going to do that. Maybe who are going to challenge things when they are slow, when they're inefficient, being focused on results. But at the same time, if we have a team full of highly ambitious people, they will compete with each other. They will like trying to fight for power. That's not what we want. We want to have balanced teams, and we want people who are also low or average on ambition, because these people are great team players, and they don't get as much involved into politics. They are satisfied with status quo. They're not looking for promotion every other year. So we need a healthy combinations in teams. And for leaders, I mentioned working on their stress management and working on how they manage their emotions, and also showing directions and showing where do we go, what do we do, when do we do that, kind of motivating and pushing people a little bit would be my tips for increasing such behavior.
If I may add something, especially to ambition, what I have observed about really ambitious people is that they always have a vision about the actual, situation. I mean, they always have some plans, what to do, what would be my ideal next step or the next situation, which means that instead of waiting for some signals, waiting for something to happen, they have a plan. They have their own goals set by themselves, and that's how they enter into a situation. Or if it's a brand new situation, it's a new thing, an unexpected one, that's the first thing they do to create their own understanding and their own way out in terms of actions and ideal outcomes. And something extra is that they always feel that things can be changed. So compared to people with lower ambition, they think that things are not factual. I mean, even if there's a negative outcome or a negative statement, they ask the question, come on guys, how can we change it? Instead of can we change it or not, or instead of taking it as a fact and then we have to live with that, they approach it like this: how can we change it? Let's do this and this and this, and we can change even the unfavorable conditions around us, the circumstances. So just asking these questions might increase ambition, or at least give this kind of feeling, which can be useful.
Thank you for the question, by the way. We will give you a couple more seconds to formulate your thoughts in case something is still, oh, we have another. Thanks for the insight about managing oneself as a leader and facing your team. What are your tips for people in leadership positions facing upwards in the hierarchy or towards BOD or stakeholders? Gabor, will you take that one, or shall I answer this one? You are muted, Gabor.
Yeah, if you can start, I will join in. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, of course, we are not, leaders are not just leaders without having any upwards responsibilities. What I would say or recommend in managing that is trying to understand that people who are above me, who are managing me, are stressed as well, because they have even higher responsibility over the whole thing, over the whole company. They are invested in what happens with the company, and they expect you to deliver. They expect you that you will be helpful with managing yourself and managing your people to delivering the results. But again, try not to get into the role that anything that is said by the people above has to be done. The communication about what is possible under certain circumstances, to communicate what's the status or what's the current mood, current possibility of the team, is something that maybe the leader above won't really see and won't really understand. And defending your people in such situations is a very important thing. Communicating clearly what the people are now capable of doing, what they are not, what they can adapt to, and being a partner with aligning on the things that will be done, keeping still your people on your mind.
What I would like to add, what people can do in such positions, is to give feedback. And again, I know it's not easy, but for example, to tell you one example we are doing in assessment systems group, by the way, is that, and it really works, we are reminding ourselves, especially the other person, that we are in HDS mode, which means that we are playing out right now our dark side characteristics, which gives us the chance not to tell the exact characteristic about the other, not to judge his or her behavior, just a kind reminder that this is HDS functioning right now. which has an impact on what we say and how we act right now. So we might think about what is going on instead of just continuing with that behavior. So as I said, it is really helpful for us. I've seen in assessment systems as well, many people stopped and started to think it over, and then they simply admitted that, yes, you are right, I'm in HDS functioning. I was not able to notice it without that feedback, but thank you very much. And then, okay, just give me 2 seconds to go back to normal and start to grab the situation and my own behavior from a different point of view. So this kind of nice feedback can work towards position above me, because they can be under stress as well, and they can ruin everything, also our relationship, because of HDS functioning. By the way, we have a lot of examples from the past that HDS can make things even worse, and very high level leaders and CEOs can fail. Of examples from past financial crises that successful leaders and very high level one CEOs failed because of their HDS characteristics, and because people around them were somehow able to give them this feedback under crisis.
Have we answered your question? Thank you for that.
I wonder if there are going to be any more questions to be answered. Maybe we can wait just 1 or 2 more seconds to see that, and if not, then we can move on to the next part. I guess that's it. Thank you for the questions. I hope you found the answers that you were looking for. And thank you for the previous 2 sessions hosted by these 2 people here. I personally find it pretty useful because I can relate to quite a lot of the things that were said here. And actually bringing this forward. So the previous 2 sessions hosted by Jack and Gabor were more about examining your personality traits as a leader, which is pretty much the first step, because it's kind of like when you're sitting on a flight and you get the instructions in case the temperature, or not the temperature, the pressure drops, excuse me, drops in the plane, and the oxygen masks fall off. What are you supposed to do? And obviously you need to help yourself first, and then you can help others. So I think the first step is pretty crucial, which is you being aware of your, let's say, developmental areas, or the things that you have to keep an eye out for, or keep in check. Because the only way to manage that is if you're aware of it, right? So, for example, I'm working from home. I'm sure you all can relate to that. And it's been going on for about, what, 7 or 8 weeks now? It's long. And, work office usually is not a problem for me because I tend to work from home for even like 2-3 weeks at a time. And then I start, missing people around me and stuff. And then I would just go to the office, and then I spend weeks in the office. So I'm kind of used to the whole remote working scene, but it's different now. For me personally, it's different for 2 reasons. One is that it's not my choice, right? It's kind of like when something is forbidden, in this case, going outside, the more you want to go outside. So just the fact that I'm obliged to do this from home, it already puts some sort of pressure on me, for example, and I'm sure you can identify with that. And the other thing that makes it different from any other just random homeworking is that we don't know how long this is going to last. So we don't know how long we have to work from home. So it's for an indefinite period. And, you know, indefinite kind of translates to uncertainty. And I'm like, most people don't deal very well with uncertainty. And I don't like uncertainty either. So, like I said, I have no problem with working from home. As a matter of fact, I actually work with an international team scattered all over Europe. And so I'm pretty used to working with people who aren't sitting in the same office with me. So again, it's not something new, but because of the whole crisis situation, we all have our dark sides, and they manifest a lot harder when it's a crisis situation. So obviously I need to be in check with myself, know what's going on with me so I can get a hang of it and manage it. But I also need to look out for the people that I work with and keep an eye out for them and just see what's going on with them individually and at a team level as well. So I'm sure we all read up on, you know, lots of different articles and researches regarding what we can do as leaders from the distance. And there's a ton of studies, researches, articles. For example, the Harvard Business Review, which is a very reliable source, or the American Journal of Psychology, or Forbes magazine for that matter. And the funny thing is, if you take all that and you accumulate all that information, and you kind of examine what it is that they conclude from leadership perspective, it will pretty much, hold on a moment, let me move to the next slide. It will pretty much come down to three focus areas. And this is important because if you examine the three focus areas, you can gain tools out of it that you can actually very practically apply to your leadership, and you can actually see feasible results or measurable results at the end. So these three focus areas are, one is the emotional well-being, and this is something that you as a leader need to monitor at a personal and at a team level too. People function differently in groups, we know that, and that's why it's important that we keep an eye on individually on people, because individually we struggle with different things, but then we don't necessarily bring all that into the team setup. But the whole group setting kind of generates different things to deal with. So the emotional well-being of your team is very important. And there are several factors here which we deal with in the workshop that we created specifically for the topic of effectively managing teams remotely. Here, there are tools that you can actually apply to your own leadership. Tools that deal with trust, for example, or the classic issue of what Jaak and Gabor also mentioned quite a few times, which is micromanagement, controlling the heck out of the people because you need to have that kind of certainty in your hands as a leader, but the damage that it can actually do in the meantime. And also how you need to balance this with under management, which is when, you know, someone like doesn't really care about, like, kind of over trusts what's happening and therefore not really practicing control, any sort of control over the situation. So the balance between the two is very important, and they are very much and very closely linked to trust. Trust, which is a two-way street. You need your people to trust you. You need to provide them a psychologically safe environment so that they are, you know, productive enough. I don't really like that word personally, but they are productive enough for you to, you know, feel at ease and not stressed out about what's going to happen or if they are doing what they are supposed to do. So we detail those things and tools that are related to those things in the emotional well-being part. Another area to consider is communication. Super important. What you communicate to your team. how often do you communicate? Do you communicate enough with them? Do you not communicate enough with them? How do you communicate? Are you transparent? Which again, I believe Yaka mentioned it before, transparency is very important. And again, it's linked to trust. And the fact that you are a leader, so you need to demonstrate leading itself so that people can feel at ease and so they can do their part and they can do what you expect them to do, because they are not worried about, you know, that kind of uncertainty that they don't have direction. You're the leader, you give them direction. Also relates to communication, how available you are. People need to feel that you are available, that they can come to you with whatever they have on their minds, whether it's their personal struggles. And I don't mean they come to you and share all sorts of super personal things, but you know what I mean. They are not afraid to come to you and share if they are struggling with something that also affects their work. So with communication, we detail those, and for each part, what, when, and how. We give you tools that you can apply to your leadership again. And those are actually things that we also do in assessment systems. For example, I regularly host so-called mukbangs with the people that I work with, which is online lunch together. And it certainly has its benefits. And that's just a tiny little example that you can do. It seems like not important, but it has a very powerful impact on the team that you work with, especially when it comes to engagement and motivation. And then finally, the third part is productivity, which I'm sure you all are very interested in because it's kind of a crucial part, but really what can fuel productivity, accumulating all this information from all the studies and articles and everything, you can pretty much break it down to 3 or 4 things. One that I would highlight here is engagement. How can you maintain and also measure engagement, which is very, very important. And we actually provide in the workshop a very simple tool that helps you monitoring engagement, and also tools to improve engagement if you find that people are not engaged enough, and it influences their productivity. So the beauty of all this is that they are very much interlinked, very much in correlation with each other, which is why we like to call it a resolution circle. So if you gain a very clear awareness of these 3 areas and the details of them, and you learn about the tools each of them can provide you, and you learn how to apply them into your leadership, it will significantly, it will make a very positive, significant impact on the way you're obliged to lead your teams remotely at the moment. That being said, I come from training, quite a few years actually, internationally. I lived and worked in quite a lot of different places in the world before. And to me, personally, it's very important that whether it's a workshop or training session, sometimes they go on for months, that the participants are engaged and they actually have something to take away after the training or the workshop is done. So in this workshop, really what we discover is this resolution circle that I just introduced to you in details with tools. What we also do is we provide a case study through which you can implement these tools and actually try them out, risk-free, not feeling, you know, any intimidation whatsoever. You can just apply these tools on the case study and get a first feel of, oh, okay, we can do it this way. That's interesting. But then you also apply this within the workshop to your own case. Examine a little bit your situation with your team, what issues you potentially face, what are the things that you got right and it's really working, and then what is it that you can still do to further improve the current state of your team and your relationship and just their productivity, really. And finally, I think it's also important that we acknowledge the benefits of actual remote teams. To spoil the whole thing, there are plenty of studies, again, that actually concluded that remote teams are more productive than local teams because there are so many benefits to the whole remote setup. And in the benefits part, that's what we really go through, because the thing is, if you manage to see the remote nature of the current crisis situation in a different light, and you discover that it's actually beneficial for you, that's when you can turn it all around to your benefit. So we deal with that because of that. And like I said, I come from training. So for me, and I'm pretty famous for this also in our organization, interactivity and just the practical manner of trainings and workshops is crucial. I'm all about that, which is what it differentiates our workshop as well. So if you're interested in this workshop, like I mentioned in the beginning, after the webinar, we will send you all the necessary details and a kind of a roundup of the webinar, as well as information about this workshop. The title is Effectively Managing Teams Remotely. Because of the 3 resolution circle parts, we named it Feel, Speak, and Do. And like I said, this is interactive, which means you will actually have to engage in small tasks, very practical ones. We will give you the tools. You will get to apply them immediately. And that's really the value of it, that you will take away tools that you will be able to apply to your leadership at the end. I think that's pretty much from my side. Let me check if there are any other questions that we can answer right now. Nope, that's it. So that's all from my side. If my co-hosts have anything else to add, then please do so. And other than that, thank you very much for coming.